Obviously, first of all, welcome to everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us today for this first meeting to give you some insight on our work plan, our schedule for developing the regional architecture update that it's also going to be developed for inclusion in our 2021 regional plan. As will be kind of addressed and mentioned by our consultant team, the development of the plan actually involves most of you and a lot of you back in 2019. But since then, as we fast forward, all of you might be aware is that we started working on our regional 2021 plan vision, the 5 big moves. So we would like to essentially pick up where we left off and consider these elements within the update. And I feel that this is, and I know this is the first of several meetings that we expect and having with all of you guys to help us update and based on your input through this process. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Elizabeth. Thank you again for joining us once again. And Elizabeth.
Alex, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Elizabeth Hannon. My firm is Sutra Research, and I'm also often part of the IBI team. And so IBI Group, Parson, Sutra, as the main consultant folks here. As Alex said, we're kind of picking up where we left off last time, looking to coordinate ITS architecture within the 5 big moves. Super exciting time for us. And as someone mentioned earlier in chat, who doesn't love ITS? So we're really thankful you're here. And we're so thankful you're here that I want to ask you to find the chat box. And if you haven't been on a Zoom meeting yet, and how many months are we into the global pandemic, but if you hover over the screen that's being shared, you should see a chat box. And if you can find that chat box, it's about in the center of the screen, and go ahead and type in your name and the agency that you're with. We'll use that to kind of record who's on the call and give me a chance to share that. Alex, do we have any folks from Sandag that you want to highlight that are on the call?
We have a number of Sandag folks on the call. I see Antoinette Meyer, our director for Mobility and Innovation Department. I have Bill Paris, who's a technology lead manager for our IT. We have Brian Lane, who's a co-lead of the Transit Lead 5 Big Moves. I also believe I saw Jennifer Williamson, who's a co-lead for the Transit Big Leap. Allison Allegre, who's part of our team, Mobility and Innovation. Eva Gabriel, who's our intern, who's been helping us on this.
Yeah.
So that we have,
I see Sanjeev is on from Sandag. Yeah, Sanjeev is on from Sandag as well. And some of our other agency partners, Alex, we have Melina from Caltrans, Vanessa De La Rosa from Caltrans. Thanks everyone for logging in here. Rodrigo from MTS, Sam from Caltrans, Sam MN is on the line as well. Mario Sanchez, hi Mario from the city of El Cajon, good to see you, or to see your name anyway. Some other folks we have from City of Poway, Harry Trang's here. Hamid from the city of Oceanside. I'm seeing Ed Walton from the city of Coronado. Good to see Coronado in the house. Robert Calix, hi Robert from NCTD, glad to have you. Always good to see Lima Saft. If you're ever in a meeting with Lima Saft, that's a good sign. Dennis, I see Dennis Desmond from MTS, the Director of Planning there. Some folks from the Port of San Diego, Stephen Schaefer's on the line, Devin Braun from MTS. Also seen from the city of San Diego, Everett Hauser's on the call. Paul from the city of Chula Vista. Roberto, city of National City. Roy from Caltrans, Roy Aboud is on the call. And then we do have the consultant team as well. And a number of folks are going to be speaking with you this morning. Many of you are familiar with Don Murphy from IBI Group. Don will be speaking with us a little bit later today. We also have Ian, Debbie, Johnny, Ty's on the call from Sutra Research, also part of the IBI team, and Rita from Parsons, part of our IBI team as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. And let's go to the next slide, please. And, and I'm just going to give a quick overview of the agenda. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask Alex to speak a little bit more to the 5 big moves and kind of an overview of the 5 big moves. We know that many of us are very familiar with them, but we want to take a look at how the 5 big moves are within the context of this project, of this ITS architectural update. So Alex will talk to us a little bit about that, and then we'll shift gears to Rita. And Rita will be sharing us kind of the overall goals and the schedule. Actually, I think that might be with Alex, but Rita will come in and talk a little bit about the background on the architecture and where we left off. Alex mentioned last time in 2019, and kind of let us know where we are with that baseline architecture. We're then going to ask you to engage with us. We have 2 hours blocked together. So we are going to kind of ask for your patience and the good college try with a new tool. I know we've used it with NCTD. Some folks may have been on a board or master plan call with us as well. And this is an interactive whiteboard. So we're going to kind of give each of you your own marker and ask you to help us out on this interactive whiteboard. And after that activity, we'll also, take a look at how the 5 big moves can be mapped into and used within the context of the architecture, kind of taking a deeper dive into that overview that Alex will give us. And then I'll wrap up with just a quick discussion, and I have a little homework assignment for you as well. So with that, Alex, let's go to the next slide, please, Ian. And I believe, Alex, you'll go over the next section.
Yes, just before I begin, real quick, as attendees are joining us, there's 2 attendees with unknown phone numbers, and I've unmuted you, so you have the ability to speak if you have to. Okay, so we'll be monitoring that. And also, just another general housekeeping.
Sorry, this is Antoinette, but we have a Sandag staff member that's been waiting in the lobby to get in, Doug DePete. Can somebody let him in?
Antoinette, we don't see him. All we see is phone numbers, but I've unmuted them if they could speak. So Doug, if one of these numbers is you, I have 2 numbers, 1760 114 ending with 114, and then 1760 11 ending with 115. And the other number, we already allowed them to participate.
Is there anyone in the waiting room
that we're missing?
We have the attendees here.
All right, I'll send him a new link. Let's keep going. Thanks.
Thanks, Antoinette.
Okay, so, well, thank you for joining us once again. So as I alluded earlier, that we wanted to pick up where we left off, but with the idea here is that we want to make sure that we incorporate in our ITS architecture the 5 big moves concept, which is really the vision for our regional plan. So what you're seeing here, at least in this illustration, they're driven by a vision where we want to provide better experience regardless of the mode they choose. And this illustration shows kind of how a typical highway could be transformed through one of the big move concepts, which is the complete corridors, which really kind of creates space for all modes, leverages technology, and keeps people moving and goods moving as well. So the concept here is through the technology elements that drives the complete corridors. You have, for example, an integrated corridor management technology. You have a technology that allows freeways and arterials to coordinate and holistically provide data analytics to operations and management. In this illustration, you could also see, for example, wireless inductive charging and infrastructure embedded in the roadways. But you also see the other components behind our 5 big moves. For example, you could see here the transit leap services that are integrated holistically, providing through this complete corridors. We would like to provide dedicated space for highways and locals in our local roads in order to provide a more reliable and fast service. So through some of the technology components for transit leap could include transit leap priority treatments, schedule maintenance and adherence, transit signal priority components, real-time transit information. But this slide also illustrates, for example, the range of flexible fleets that we'll be able to accommodate through these 5 big moves concepts by providing dedicated space that is safe for smaller micromobility, providing dedicated space for our HOV lanes, making rideshare and micromobility transit more competitive. So some of the sort of technological components for flexible fleets could be real-time micromobility, microtransit, NEV travel information, services and reservations, curb management. But also you can see here sort of the relationship between mobility hub concepts, which is really kind of anchored by our transit LEAP services. The idea here is through our vision, we would offer amenities to make sure that transit is easy and enjoyable. So some of the sort of mobility hub components of technology, you have kind of electronic bike scooter sharing other information to make that first and last mile connection, EV charging components, control package lockers also. But finally kind of bringing here, and this is sort of the larger context of the 5 big moves, is that through the next OS, the idea here is that the next OS will make all these systems to work together using data, technology. The idea here is we would be able to manage the lanes real time depending on change in demand, just like what we have using DSS technology running in the background. The idea here is that perhaps under certain hours of the day, we'll be able to manage those lanes, dedicate freight or transit, but also help us manage during incidents, provide restrictions during emergency vehicles. The whole idea is really kind of how can we maximize the utility of our assets, the proposed systems that we propose. And then at the local level, if you could switch to the next slide, Ian. Thank you, Ian. So at the local level, we also have these 5 big move concepts, right? So the idea here is how do we do it? But here's just an example at the intersection level where through technology, we'll be able to provide that connected environment, not only between the modes themselves, whether it's the vehicles to infrastructure, the buses to infrastructure, but also with active transportation components. Really, the idea here is through technology, and at the local level, we want to improve safety, but also operation on our intersections. So, again, with the idea here is that in order to advance our 5 big moves, visions, and strategies, it's based on technology foundation, but that requires and it's predicated upon effective coordination between organizations, both at the institutional, but also at the technical level. So that's what the ITS USDOT National Architecture Framework provides. It provides the tools, it provides a framework to exploit those opportunities that exist, to maintain consistency across the various agencies, across the various technologies, and puts that into an implementation process. And so that's what the architecture framework provides. It provides us a number of tools, but also provides us what are the institutional agreements that we need to consider. From a technical side, what are those data, functional flows that need to be considered, and what are those elements that we need to integrate? Necessary to actually provide and make sure that we implement our ITS projects and systems. So again, the ITS architecture is just one piece of the larger puzzle that needs to be developed to help advance and determine how do we work together with our regional and local partners, but also how do we put the pieces together so we can start implementing these technologies, and again, to help advance our 5 big moves concept. So again, the plan here is part of the RTP process, the reasoning for undertaking these workshops and getting input from all of you. Like I said, this is probably one of many meetings that we're going to be asking for all of you to participate. And this is the first workshop, but that's the intent of the ITS architecture, how to bring the implementation of the 5 big moves more at the, I would say, project development process. With that, I'll just turn it over to, I believe it's going to be Rita who's going to take on the next slide.
Actually, I have the next 2 slides.
Okay, thanks, Don.
This is Don, no problem. So normally you'll be meeting Stacy Unholz, who's actually our project manager. She's been a little under the weather, but she'll be joining us. And I think she's actually listening in on the call today just to keep track and make sure we don't step out of line. So to Alex's point, just an overview of goals and objectives for the project effort that's underway. As Alex mentioned, the main element is trying to update the regional ITS architecture to integrate those 5 big moves. I think many of you on the call today were probably involved in the previous effort about a year plus ago. So there is a foundation we're starting from that included a lot of the information we were provided by the different agencies on their current systems. So basically we'll be building on that and modifying that to make sure it kind of reflects the latest thinking in terms of policies and systems and where we want to head to the future, basically everything that Alex was talking about over the last couple of slides. There's also the opportunity to identify and fill in any missing gaps in the architecture. We're also bringing it into the latest version of the what's called ArcIT. So if you think of the national architecture, ArcIT is a representative representation of that. And we'll be talking a little later about RADit, which is the tool we're using to put this information into. So whereas before the region only kind of had a written document for the architecture, we're actually going to have an online interactive element on the architecture that you'll be able to use. And part of the goal there is to create a framework within that online architecture that allows the users to interact with it in a more streamlined fashion, because the architecture, obviously, there's a lot of details in there. There's a lot of information. It's easy to get lost, but we're going to try and provide some typical frameworks that make it easier for everyone to track down and kind of use that information as part of the project development lifecycle. And that ultimately will be available on the web. Next slide, please. Just high level on the schedule real quick. We're about a 7-month timeline overall. We've been underway with collecting what's available information in terms of ongoing studies and concept developments. We expect to be receiving more of that as efforts develop over time. We're also going to be asking the various stakeholders, including those folks on the call, kind of for additional information and follow-up. Part of that will be the interactive exercise that Elizabeth's going to explain in a little bit. We did move the stakeholder meeting up a little bit to coincide with the kickoff, just to fit better with our efforts. The main deliverables are really what will be the draft architecture, which you can view as is instituted in that ArcIT, RADIT tool, and then review and refinement of that for the final architecture. And then there'll be some training activities to help everybody understand how they can interact with it and use it in examples if you're developing different project concepts and what information's in there that everyone will be able to leverage. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Rita, who's going to give us some background on the architecture overall for those that haven't been engaged with ITS architecture in the past, as well as a little update on where we left off from prior efforts.
Hi, my name is Rita Broman. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Rita.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's so hard when you're used to speaking and seeing faces, and if they kind of blank over, then you know, oh, that didn't come across very good. So it's kind of hard when you're speaking to the screen and you can't see anyone. So my name is Rita Broman. I was part of the National Architecture team, so I helped develop the architecture. A number of you, I recognize your names, so probably met with you. I was involved with IBI in the first project that we did in phase 1. So what I want to do is kind of just go through a little bit for those of you who are not familiar with architecture. So maybe through a little bit of the background and what it is. I wish I knew how many did understand it or did know it, but because I know you guys are super knowledgeable, those of you who have worked with it. But basically it's a mandated blueprint, like if you were looking at a blueprint of a house and you said, I think I'll take this room, this room, this room, but I don't want that room and I need a hall. So that's kind of what we're doing with the architecture. And a regional architecture update is to take the federal ITS architecture, which is massive, and to pull the pieces out of it that we want and create our own regional architecture. So funded ITS deployments is your goal. You cannot implement ITS projects without having the regional ITS architecture. So the good news is you have regional architecture right now. The better news is we're going to update it so that it fits the plan as the region grows and as the vision that you heard Alex talk about a minute ago moves forward. So it's based on the services. I think when I met with a number of you, when we met with you, and I met face-to-face with several of you, and we had some conversations about what you did do, what you didn't want to do, what you already had there. But it sets a framework for integrating systems, and it guides our deployment. The architecture itself is literally hundreds of thousands of pages loaded into some software, which we'll talk about in a minute. So what it provides for you is we put the stakeholders in. It's kind of cool. You put stakeholders in, you put who's going to connect, what they're going to do, what activities they want, and what services they want. If you'll go to the next screen. Ian, can you go to the next screen? So then what happens is it gives you back what you need for the regional. So it's relevant to your own specific ITS, what you have there, your own intelligent transportation system. So it provides a reference for all the stuff, like if you have out there, let's say you have, but it's very high level. So CCTV cameras, any kind of field equipment on the roadside, it might just identify field equipment, and then you start to break it down as you identify the services. So it's no longer called, quote, the national ITS architecture. What you see there is it says ARCIT. So the national ITS architecture was predominantly focused on public agency. CVRA, which stands for Connected Vehicle Reference Implementation Architecture, it actually was joined together, and together they became ARCIT. So now it's not called, quote, the national ITS architecture, it's called ARCIT. So it provides consistent language, which is really important, so that you have emergency responders talking about the same things as those who are talking in the transportation field. And then when we talk about operations and planners, we have different languages. A lot of times we do, and we'll use acronyms, and we don't even realize it. So the ITS architecture, Intelligent Transportation Systems architecture, gives us kind of a consistent language to use so that we know what we're talking about, and we're all talking about the same thing. So we have existing and planned projects, and so the architecture helps us to look at all those different things. I hope I'm not talking too fast, because sometimes I do that when I'm trying to hurry up. So go to the next slide. This will give you kind of a picture of what I was saying. So if you look to your left side, you'll see state traffic, local traffic, emergency service, and you see the people who are communicating with those buildings. Those are the ugliest traffic management center I've ever seen, but traffic management center communicates with your dynamic message signs, or your CMSs, your field equipment, CCTV cameras, all goes into a regional hub. What got added with ARCIT from CVRIA is all of your privatized things. Everything is now connected vehicles. Everything's in the sky. Everything is communicating with everything else around it. So I think for a while, as the architecture team, we called it like vehicle V2I, V22, it's like vehicle to infrastructure, infrastructure to vehicles, vehicles to vehicles, and now it's just connected vehicles, period. And it includes a lot. So if you look to your left, you'll see or to the right side of the screen, you're gonna see a whole bunch of privatized stuff. So ARCIT, your regional architecture, now includes all of those things. And so if you want to go to the next slide. So basically, all of those things now feed into a software called RADIT. When I met with you guys, it's the Regional Architecture Development for Intelligent Transportation. When we met with you guys, I want to say it's been it'll be 2 years in February, so it's been a year and a half when we actually met face-to-face and talked about your systems. So there's two softwares. We just call them tools. They're just tools to use. So there's the huge ARCIT, which is the architecture, and it's way too much for everybody to figure out how to work with it. But we just want to be able to choose the services that you have. And then ARCIT, the tool, RADIT, which is the Regional Architecture Development, will connect the things for us. So that's what I think when we met, that's what I showed you, was your own systems connected through RADIT. So this is the level we're going to go to, which is the free tools. If you want to download them, you can go to the ITS architecture, or I believe it's at the federal highway level. You can go and just, we'll send you a link to it if you want to download it, but you can download RADIT and work with it and see what it is, and even look at your own stuff if you'd like to. But the second level down is Set It. Go back to the screen one more. Okay, so Set It. Set It is your systems engineering tool for intelligent transportation. This is what you do with project architecture. We're not going to be doing a lot of separate project architectures, but when you do a major project or you're working on one, you will pull the stuff out of the regional architecture into a Set It file, which will be private, which will be your just a project architecture. So what you have here below is kind of a map. It just shows you where all of it is, and it's all part of the transportation planning process. So funded projects must come out of the plan, then into project development, which is where you use Set It, and then implemented projects, and then operations and maintenance, back to monitoring evaluation. So that's kind of a life cycle there. Now you can go to the next one. Okay, so why does it need to be updated? I probably don't. You guys could tell me this answer. It's because we've changed the direction, because we have moved from it's, first of all, technology changing makes things change, although the architecture is technology neutral. The direction that we're going, who's going to speak to each other, those things change. So getting feedback from you guys was really, really good, but I don't think that we closed that circle. And now we're kind of moving in a different direction with the 5 big, so, or the big 5. And so we want to look at those and look at what we have in place and see where we can go from now. So the summary of the completion was, we actually have an ARCID file, which is really, we think it's pretty well done. We have now gone in there, and the services that you guys selected, which have already been selected, we are going to now identify, and today we're going to work on some of those. You're going to learn more about that, so you'll be more familiar with this. But basically those services are going to be looked at and broken out into those 5 areas. So like connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, they've emerged. And so we're going to be looking more at that. So you want to go to the next one. So previous stakeholder meeting involvement, just to kind of summarize where we were, where we are now. Smart Mobility Kickoff was in October of 2018. In February of 2019, we met with all of these organizations. Now, if you're here representing one of these organizations and I didn't meet with you, or we didn't meet with you, we did meet with other people who were there before. So just wanted to let you know that, and we look forward to meeting you, getting to know you, and seeing where to go together from now. But we're here to help you and serve you and help figure out what your services are, so that we can walk through this together. So don't get too hung up on the actual terminology of architecture. We'll walk you through all that. So I think with that, we should probably just move into the next phase, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Rita. It's Elizabeth. Thanks so much for going through that. And you know, there is a lot to what you were sharing there. So I want to take just a moment before we jump into the interactive exercise and just see if there are any questions out there. If you do have a question, most of you are actually showing as panelists rather than attendees. And so if you have a question, if you can just go to the chat box and drop your name into there, then that way I can call on you. So if you have a question, go to the chat box, drop your name in, and that way I can call on you. And
don't be afraid to ask a question either. Like, it's not, I know a lot of people go, oh, well, you know, I don't want to raise my hand because that's not a question that I would feel like I should be asking. Yeah. There's no stupid questions. Trust me, anything you want to ask is not, it's free to ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody come in just yet, but I appreciate that, Rita, and we do want to stay open to questions throughout. And as we get ready to shift to the interactive exercise, just sort of chatting with you all here to see if anyone has any questions over, what Alex covered, kind of the 5 big moves, what Dawn covered, the specifics of the project, and then Rita, a little more specifics on the RAD IT, SET IT, and the ARC, IT ARC IT is what it's called now. But I'm not seeing any questions at this time, which is, it's super exciting because, we're all doing these Zoom calls now since the pandemic. And this is the time where I get to encourage you to come back to the screen from, if you happen to be multitasking while we were on the call, come back to the screen and talk with us just a little bit. We're going to need to ask you to do a few things here because what we'd like to do with this next section is learn a little bit more about what's going on with each of the public agencies. And so I want to see if you have at your desk or your lounge chair or wherever you're taking the call from, if you have a piece of paper or something that you can write on, because I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of a brain dump first. And what I want you to first focus on, so find something to write on, and then in just a minute, we'll do this on the screen. But if you have something to write on, what I'd like you to do is just storm your brain for a moment and start thinking about what projects do you have underway? What current projects are in motion? Perhaps there's some things that you're getting together for the CMCPs. What are you working on with other agencies? We're looking for a list of projects that are kind of, in motion right now. And I'd like to give you just a couple of minutes to jot down a list of 2, 3, 4, 5 projects that maybe came online since the last time we spoke. Rita was talking about the interactive activities that we have, but we're looking for the projects, obviously, I should say that, relate to systems or have an intelligent transportation system component. So just on your own, take a moment, just make a list, just name the projects you're working on. And I'm just going to give us a few moments to do that on your own.
And Rita, if I understand, and Elizabeth, this could be from implementing new detections all the way to updating your software, right? Backend systems or
That's
all the way
right.
up to a total project. Okay.
That's right.
So shouldn't there be some sound here like ding, ding, ding,
Yeah.
ding?
Yeah, the Jeopardy music. Yeah, so as you're thinking about, what projects you have, maybe since the last time we met, what has been implemented, what's getting ready or close to being implemented. And then I'm going to add another assignment for you. Let's take just one more moment making your list of projects underway. So as you're wrapping up your list of projects underway, now we want to kind of put on our dreamer hats. We want to look at what projects are desired. So I want you to have two lists on your pieces of paper, or whatever you're writing on at home there. A list of projects underway, and then desired. What kind of projects are you talking about at the agency? What are your colleagues talking about? What would you like to see? What other projects would you like to see? Yeah, so two lists you're working on. What projects are sort of underway or have been in motion since the last time we spoke? What are you working on? What are you doing for the CMCP? What kind of IT projects, systems projects are you working on? And then on the desired, or on either list, but on the desired project list, let's not worry about cost or funding. We're thinking big, we're dreaming, we're hoping. So don't worry about cost or funding. And we're just going to take another moment or two here and wrap up your list, and then we're going to do something with those. Ian or Debbie, as we wrap up here, can you shift our screen share over to the mural board, please? I think Debbie's screen sharing that. Okay, everyone. Hopefully that was enough time to kind of get your project list together. And remember, if you have a question, feel free to unmute. Raise your hand if you see that function, or type your name into the chat, and that way I can call on you. But what we're going to do now is ask you to all jump over onto this. The software is called Mural, and this is a mural canvas that we're working on, and it's just like a whiteboard that you might have in a classroom or in a workshop room. And in just a moment, we're going to put into chat a link for you to come live over to this mural board and find your agency name, and then fill in the pink. You might see on the screen here, there's pink Post-it notes, and you're going to fill in the pink Post-it notes, those projects that were underway, the first set of project lists that you jotted down. And then in the yellow, we're going to ask you to fill in those that are desired, those kind of dream projects that we're looking for. Debbie, before everyone jumps on over into the mural board, can you please just give us a lay of the land here and show everyone how they would be filling out these Post-it notes?
Yes, absolutely. So if you you'll see that Ian is showing the board, and if you look in the bottom right corner, you'll see some navigation. You can zoom in and out. You can move around to find your agency. And once you locate that, you can zoom in, and so you'll be able to see what you're typing. You can also use your, your mouse. It's you can drag and drop kind of motion. So it's pretty, for the most part, intuitive. But if you have any questions, of course, feel free to unmute and just say, you're having an issue with anything, and we'll help you out. If you run out of Post-its, we have extra Post-its located at the bottom as well. So you can just unmute, let us know, and we can drag one over to you if you're having any trouble navigating with that as well.
So Debbie, will you, in that example, will you show us how we would fill one out? Because I want to make sure everyone adds your agency name. So Debbie, if you were going to add one, okay, Debbie's agency, she's typing in a pink, so she's showing a project that's underway. So agency is representing her agency name. And then this agency named agency is, she's added smart signals. And then in the next one for her desired project, she's added her agency name and smart city infrastructure. So what we'd like you to do you see floating around? Yeah, I see some of you have begun to sign in, and I see Debbie's name. I can follow Debbie, but I also see like the giraffe, and I think there's is that a fly or a bee, a bee? When you log into the Mural app, you'll be assigned an animal character. Go ahead and put your name so you can follow yourself around. But for instance, I see Raj, and he's a visiting giraffe. And what Raj needs to do is find his agency and use the pink Post-it to type in his agency name, Caltrans, and then type in his project. So Ian's placed the Mural link in the chat box. So everyone at this time, there's quite a few of us. I think there's 40, almost 50 folks on the call, but we're asking you to go to the Mural by following the link that's in the chat box. When you log in, type in your name so you can find yourself. And I'm just going to navigate, and we want to use this tool as this project unfolds. And so this is kind of a test. So we appreciate patience and taking this learning opportunity to use this whiteboard tool. So again, if you have a question, unmute, ask the question, drop it in. Debbie, is there a problem with the first Mural link? Oh, okay, I see two of them in there. Yeah, I see the Mural link wasn't working. So it looks like for some people, try the second one. And thanks for participating. I can see some folks are over here. Good, I see some Sandag folks dropping information in.
Real quick, Elizabeth and Debbie, is there a difference if whether we do use Explorer or
Google or
Google.
Chat or Google Chrome? I don't know of one. I've seen it work on both browsers.
Okay.
But like Melina, I see you asking, or Hamid, I see you also asking. Debbie put a second link in there. And so, yeah, everyone's doing great. Find your agency. Remember, pink is for sort of the projects underway, and yellow are for those desired.
Elizabeth, if people can't get into the Mural, maybe like agency restrictions or something prevents it, or maybe it's some other idiosyncrasy. If they still have problems with the second link, then it looks like some people are having more success on Chrome than Explorer. But if you can't get in, please don't get frustrated. You can just type it in the chat line, and we'll reinsert the information. This is part of what Elizabeth said. We're experimenting. We hope to be able to use these kind of interactive tools with the team as we progress through the project. So this is a little bit of an experiment to see how well things go.
And I would advise to use Chrome because that's how I got in. The other tip here too is that if you're running out of Post-it, you could use your right click on your mouse and make a copy of a Post-it as well.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, it's looking good though. Most folks are filling in good. Carlsbad, I see somebody starting. I saw some Carlsbad folks. How about my City of Chula Vista folks? I'm pretty sure some of you are on the line. And Coronado. I'm looking to see how you guys are doing. don't recall anyone from Imperial Beach, but how about Poway?
I see Paul got a hold of the Chula Vista, so that's great. I sort of feel like
Good.
we're narrowing horse races or something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I see Tam from Oceanside is, and how's El Cajon doing? Oh, good, El Cajon, I see you, Mario, thank you. NCTD's filling out. Yeah, this is great. Most folks are able to do it, and I'm just doing a couple call outs. I thought we had some folks on the call, City of Encinitas or National City. Perhaps you're having trouble logging in. National City High Firewall. Oh, I see. I'm not sure who that is, but from Engineering and Public Works there. National City will check back with you. I'm sorry, the firewall won't work. If you have projects, the National City person, I don't see your name, but can you drop those into the chat box and we'll just fill in the Post-it notes for you. And the same with, I see El Cajon's going, La Mesa, anyone on the call for La Mesa, Escondido, all of those folks, drop your projects into the chat box and we can fill that out. Carlsbad, we have some more big ideas. Carlsbad, was looking to see how you guys were doing. I think David, you were filling some out. Yeah, and just a reminder, I know the Post-it notes get kind of small. We'll be able to zoom out on these in a moment, but if you can remember to drop your agency name in, that'll help us. If not, we're going to, well, if you can put it in there, that'd be great. Otherwise, we'll figure out a workaround. Yeah, Craig, thanks so much. I see Escondido dropping some projects in, so Ian or Johnny can put those in. And National City, if you want to do the same, drop them into chat. So here's what we're going to do, folks. It is 3:24. And once we get the board set, meaning we have most everyone's projects, we're going to need to take just a few moments, maybe 5, to allow the project team. We're going to do some grouping. We're going to take a look at grouping these, and we're also going to take a look at how these projects align within our 5 big moves that we've been talking about today. In order to do that, we're going to take a break. So I see maybe 5 or 6 folks still working on the board. That's wonderful. I see National City and Escondido putting some notes into chat. So we're getting those documented. But I'm letting you know about the break because I can see some folks, MTS, looks like you guys were rocking it. At Chula Vista, you have some, we're still entering a few. Sandag, a lot of projects from Sandag, thanks team. If you are done with doing that, we are going to take the, like I said, this break. Looks like we're going to last till about 3:40, finishing up this exercise and kind of taking that break. So we're about halfway through the call. So if you need to take a bio break, get your afternoon snack, somebody could please send me some dark chocolate, that'd be helpful. But as we're wrapping up, what we want to do is make sure everybody's back on the call by 3:40, or stay on the call and don't log off. But feel free to take a break, catch up on emails if you're not filling out your Post-its. But there's a lot going on. I see Port of San Diego folks filling that out. Yeah, the Oceanside items, I think, are being filled out by Johnny. Yeah, Debbie's there. Yeah, and I'm just letting Craig know I see both your underway and your desired projects, so we'll enter those. And thanks for working with us here. And then National City, oh, it's Roberto. Sorry, Roberto. I see some of your planned projects, it looks like. If you have any desired ones, Roberto, drop those in too. So as you're wrapping up, filling in your Post-it notes, I see a visiting shrimp still clicking around and a visiting lobster. But if you finished filling in your Post-it notes, again, you're free till 3:40, I mean, about 13 minutes. But in about 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to close out the board. Hi, and I do not see notes from Chula Vista yet. Sam, I see you talking to me there. And I don't see him in the chat. Let's see. Oh, Vista, so sorry. Sam from Vista. And I don't see him dropped in. Do you want to drop your project list into the chat again?
I just want to say how impressed I am with all of you and how
Yeah.
you're just filling all this in. It's just a great job. I just want to pat you on the back and say, good job. I'm impressed.
Yeah, thanks so much. Ian, can you chat with Sam H from Vista and get his notes? He's privately chatting with me. And Sam, I'm sure
Yeah,
you can.
sure, I'll do that. I'm just filling in the ones from Escondido now, and then
Okay. Yeah, or I could ask Johnny if you're available. Can you chat with Sam from Vista and grab his projects? That's what I'd like to do in just about 2 minutes, is close out the mural board. If you've completed your Post-its, you're welcome to sign out of mural. We're going to shift gears here in just a moment and take over, and the project team's going to be moving around the Post-it notes.
I just want to make sure before we close that, I think possibly we had something in Oceanside, but it got deleted or it's not there anymore. So
Yeah, I think Ian's working on those. Is that from Oceanside? Oh, no,
Yeah,
Ian's
we may want to give it just a little bit longer, because I see a lot of people trying to still work on some things here.
Yeah, mostly the project team. Yeah, Oceanside, I'm not sure. I don't recall who was filling in Oceanside. Was that Tam? Somehow the Oceanside ones were deleted.
I think Tam says yes in the chat.
Tam, you can either drop them into chat and the project team will do it, or let's have you re-enter them. Okay. With the exception of, and I see Vista's going in, thank you for working with Sam. So, and then we just need, I think, Tam, and then I'm just seeing the project team, Debbie and Johnny and folks in there. So Debbie, in just a moment, let's screen grab here. And Oceanside, I'll have to come back to. Oh, okay, good. This is filling them out. Okay, thanks everyone. Let's rejoin here in 7 minutes. And Debbie, if that hopefully gives us enough time. Well, here I see Oceanside still filling out.
Just, I gave them back their Post-its. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I don't, thank you, Ian.
So do we want to shift the view back to the PowerPoint? I think it's just the team members moving stuff around now.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just chiming in so everyone knows that we're on just on a little bit of break while the team shifts those things, and then we'll come back together and see what everything looks like.
Ian, I think we're back on the mural view instead of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I was just checking Dawn to make sure that these last ones, because there's a few that are coming in from the
Oh,
Oceanside, so I was trying to fill those out.
okay.
Yes. Okay, everyone. Let's come back together. So if you can hear my voice, you should see me on the screen. And I did get a promise of dark chocolate in the chat box, but none materialized. But thanks so much for filling out the mural post. It's in. Alex will do a little, poll and kind of check the pulse of the CTAC members, and see how this tool will work for future projects. Looks like most of us got it figured out. Some firewall problems that we may have a workaround. But what's happening in the background now is that Debbie and Johnny from the IBI team are kind of grouping those projects together under each of the 5 big moves, so that we can have a discussion about those. And so, if you had, let's say, a transit signal priority or a freight signal priority project, they're moving those post-its into the complete corridors of the 5 big moves. When I say moving those into, I mean we're just going to look at what projects are being grouped under it. So yeah, we're grouping things that are similar. Perhaps we might see, electric vehicle infrastructure from several of the communities. So we'll group that together and see how many of us are looking at those ideas, or some curb management ideas. Perhaps there's some, real-time transit traveler information, or fleet vehicle tracking. Maybe there's something that your community's working with the trucking community, or some ideas that come into Transit Leap. Perhaps there's some mobility hub ideas. I know we've got some cool mobility hub projects, Oceanside, and other spots. But do we have electric vehicle charging infrastructure there at the mobility hubs? We're going to take a look at that collectively. So the project team's just going to take a few more moments to do that. And Ian, if you're ready, and if everyone's back with us, and it looks like everyone is, let's talk a little bit more with I think the next slide, Ian.
The next slide is we move over into, we were going to do this after the exercise.
Yeah, so we're going to shift gears, and why don't you go ahead and talk about this section, and then we'll jump back over to the mural.
Okay, sure. I think Dawn, if you're still on the line, you were going to walk us through this slide.
Oh, thanks. It's John. Don, I'm going to unmute you.
Sorry guys, I was helping with the mural. Yeah, just real quick. So kind of what does this look like from an agency user standpoint, and how will you be able to use the architecture once it's restructured into the 5 big moves? So starting over on the left, if you look at the architecture user and you start with the concept, or some of the concepts you guys have been listing in your interactive exercise, you can look into, where does that fall within the 5 big moves, and what characteristics does that system have within your city, whether it's city specific or corridor specific, depends on the level of the project you're tackling. And then the next stage is to go into the architecture project framework and that'll be online on the website. And you'll be able to call that up from your desk and basically consider what is the phasing of the project, what are the roles and responsibilities. So maybe it's a project that has both local and regional components, and what functions are in play, and then what interconnectivity needs to be considered. So throughout your project lifecycle, all the way from the early concept development, maybe even getting funding or putting in grant applications for certain things, you can use the architecture for background with that. As Rita said, compliance with the regional architecture gives you compliance with the national architecture, which is an important thing for your funding opportunities. It also carries through with information through from your planning to your preliminary engineering stages, and ultimately into more detailed project specifics, as Rita was talking about, was set it. So basically there'll be a framework within the architecture, and once you identify kind of where you are within the 5 big moves, you'll be able to call up that framework and then make specific selections from there that are relevant to you for that particular project. And then you'll be able to use it both for the early conceptual standpoint, as well as use it as you get more into the more detailed elements of your project lifecycle. And I think with that, Ian's gonna, go ahead.
Can I just ask a question? I think that for me, if I were sitting in their seat, I would want to have a sample laid out before me, like one sample of starting from one of the examples, maybe that came forward, so that they could see that happening. I can see it in a picture, but maybe see one thing happening.
Yeah, I think there's one in later.
Yeah, I'm going to cover that in a little bit more depth later on. So it's either we go through it right now, or Elizabeth, I'm not sure if we're going to jump back to the mural board now before continuing on with the slides.
I think I'd give the team a little more time to sort the mural because there's quite a few post-its. So I'd say, and let's go ahead and cover your slides on the background, and then see where we're at. We can come back to the mural and see how we're doing.
Sure. Actually works as a good segue. So hi, everybody. My name is Ian Kilgour. I'm a system engineer with IBI Group. So like Rita was saying, sometimes it helps, I think, maybe to beef up the concept a little bit with sort of a bit more of a concrete example. So the first thing that I was going to introduce, a lot of you might know already the terminology within the architecture, but the architecture service packages. So we've been doing an exercise where we've been looking at underway and desired systems, but the concept of a service package within ArcIT, so these represent and as slices of the architecture that address specific functions, and they collect together systems, devices, and their functional information flows. So many of the systems that we have sussed out on the mural that we're going to be talking about more when we get back to it, they would sort of fill and correspond quite well, I think, to some of these service packages that are contained within the architecture. So in the newest ArcIT version 8.3, the service package categories have been greatly expanded, as you can see here below. So we've got commercial vehicle operations, data management, maintenance and construction, parking management, public safety, public transportation, support systems, which will include GIS, COM, and IT safety authentication, sustainable travel, traffic management, traveler information, vehicle safety, and weather. And just to the right here, we've got an example of what a service package looks like in terms of the diagram showing all the elements and the interconnections. So this example here is for PT09 for transit signal priority. That fits under the public transportation category of service packages. And if we relate it back to the 5 big moves, that would figure quite prominently within the complete corridors move, as well as the transit leap move. So in a moment, we're going to go back to the mural, and we're going to do a very similar exercise to this, what I'm illustrating on the service package level. So what we've tried to do already in terms of the services that are already included within the architecture is to identify and disposition the services that would fit within one or more of the different 5 big moves. So a couple of examples here. Under Transit Leap, we've got transit vehicle tracking, mobility hubs. An example might be parking electronic management that would fit into that. Emergency vehicle preemption that would move into as the architecture under flexible fleets, or under the 5 big moves under flexible fleets. Transit signal priority, which was the aforementioned example, would go, like I said, under complete corridors, but also under Transit Leap as well. And then for NextOS, we've got performance monitoring. Fits into that. So this will help to solidify sort of the technical framework and to better illustrate from an architecture perspective what each big move will comprise of. And we hope that this will ultimately make it easier for user accessibility into the architecture once it's posted in a web-based format. And I'll get into that a little bit more broadly in a couple of slides from now. So maybe Elizabeth and Dawn, I'll cover this one on the system engineering process, and then we'll
Yeah,
see if we
just,
want to switch back.
yeah, go ahead and complete your slides there, Ian. That's great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, so for all the system engineers and perhaps even the non-system engineers in the room out there, we just wanted to take the opportunity to relate back the work that we're doing to the V diagram from the system engineering process and show where the ArcIT and associated tools fulfill their crucial roles. So the V diagram follows a project through its complete life cycle, and particularly it breaks down the different stages of planning, high-level design, and detailed design, along with each of the corresponding validation phases that goes with each of those. So obviously, as was mentioned previously, the development of an ArcIT regional architecture for San Diego County is a prerequisite for obtaining federal funding of projects and initiatives. And as we mentioned, this process was begun 2018 and continued on into 2019 when we first spoke with many of you about this. And now we're updating this process to align the architecture with the 5 big moves. As we noted earlier, Rita was talking about the RADA tools, or the different tools that we're using for this process. So this is sort of first for our region. Like we said, the previous incarnation of the architecture in the early 2000s were structured as more of a reference document. But now we're going to be using the RADA tool to assist with the high-level planning and also get into some of the ConOps and concept high-level design phase for the projects. And as Rita explained earlier, just kind of reiterated here onto the V diagram, that as we move along the V diagram into the system requirements and subsequent design phases, project architectures can be developed drawing from the elements of the established regional architecture as a base, and the more detailed design activities for project architectures can make use of the SEDIT systems engineering tool. So one of the benefits of developing the regional architecture in the RADA tool rather than it remaining as a reference document is that the RADA tool will allow us to export content from the regional architecture database into a web accessible content. And the idea there is so that it can be a living rather than a static representation. This slide just highlights some of the browser views that can be generated. And so we've got, the introductory page, and then we've got some further drill down pages where we can go into all the different components of the architecture. And ultimately, this is just an example, and that can be coordinated and integrated into the look and feel of Sandag's 5 big moves, regional planning, and it can be made available to all of you for review via the internet. So I'd just like to end off this portion of the slides with a real world example, as Rita started us off with, of how an individual user in one of our partner agencies could access the architecture pages once they are made available online. Once again, the goal here would be to show how this can help stakeholders to complete their projects using a common and standardized framework. So we'll start with an example. A traffic engineer from one of our emerging cities wants to implement a smart signals project in her jurisdiction. We saw a lot of that in terms of the desired projects on the that were being filled in the mural a few minutes ago. So the idea there is that that engineer would consult the online content of the regional architecture that will be made available. And you can browse through the standardized ITS inventory and then look through the inventory until you discover the signals ITS field equipment. And you can click on that, and then it will reveal the context diagram for that signals ITS field equipment element. And it will show all of the systems and all the different linkages that it can have with other systems. So that would include, for example, a local TMC, if that is available yet or exists yet. And that would be for adaptive control and monitoring. Also connection with transit vehicles for TSP requests, connection with personal vehicles, multimodal riders and pedestrians for detector and probe data linkages, as well as crossing requests. Then also we've got linkages with first responders, emergency vehicle preemption calls, and also with some standardized data sources for network time. That's if you were, making sure that you wanted to do coordinated signals, you have to make sure you have a standardized source there. And so the idea there is that the schematic from the architecture will help to illustrate the flows and linkages between ITS components. And then each of these flows and linkages is tied back to standards that the engineer can refer back to in completing the project successfully. And the hope there is that it's done in a manner which fits well within our regional plan. So with that, I think
Ian, one thing Alex wanted to talk to is if there's innovative areas, how we can address those in a service package or basically deal with those in terms of modifying the architecture or reflecting that in the architecture.
Yeah, so I know that if we ask for Rita's opinion, she would say on that the architecture is very broad and comprehensive, and there's a lot of thought that was put into expanding the architecture recently to try and cover all aspects of ITS that we could find within both the public agency level and in the private sector as well. So as much as possible, I think we would try and stay within what's already been defined within the architecture, because all of that is so well defined and tied back to those standards that we want to try and make sure that we take advantage of and link back to. But in the event that there was something that was more custom that we were doing here differently within the region, there is always the option to add, say, a custom service or a custom inventory element. And so we could consider doing that in certain cases. And then afterwards, we would define what the interchanges for our region would be, the data flows between those systems, innovative systems, and the existing systems within the region. And we would have to, if it was not tied back to standards, then we could suggest some. But we can do that in an exception case, but then as much as possible, I think we can try and draw from what's available in the standard ARKit.
I think the other thing to note, and it isn't an unsubstantial effort, but in trying to, if you just go into the national architecture information, you'll find a lot of things named differently or generally named, and we have the opportunity. We've done some of this in the prior work, but there's more work to be done in terms of making it match with the 5 big moves, how we call things out in the 5 big moves, and so that so everyone can kind of follow those descriptions more readily. For example, you'll see some examples in here where MTS is in there and NCTD and various cities. So I think that's something that'll be helpful in the architecture as we start this next round of update as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, that's the process of going from the national ITS architecture or the ARKit and developing a regional one, is that you're applying the national template down to the specific aspects of our region. And that's where you're going to find, the distinction between our different transit agencies and our different cities, the sort of tier grouping of emerging cities and the larger cities within the county. And, we can make use of that customization in order to make sure that everything is in the language that folks here within our region will understand and relate to.
And just remember, you're customizing it at a different level every time that you define the requirements and more specifics about your project. So you started out at the regional architecture, it's going to be a very high level, and even here, you're going to say, yeah, these are maybes, maybe we're going to do this, maybe we're going to do that. So we would pull in the possibilities as we've been talking about dreaming about projects. You might pull in the possibilities here. And and then decide later, we don't want this or this, or we're not going to connect this, or we're not going to, do control plans or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so, Rita. And I think we'll also evolve this with the team as we have more meetings. This is just our kind of
Sure.
starting off. I think everybody's getting a sense there's a whole lot of things here to absorb across a whole broad range of systems and potential types of projects. I think Sanjeev had a question about looks powerful in terms of leveraging where is the architecture or the systems engineering package already deployed that we can leverage. I think there are existing elements within the architecture today. So if you're trying to get certain things put together for a project or a concept, let us know and we'll see what we can draw out of the existing architecture that might be useful to you. Right now, of course, it's not accessible online and all of that, but we do have the files that we're starting from today.
And they're pretty massive, and they do have a lot of information in them, and you're exactly right to draw on if you're looking for, it has requirements, it has all kinds of things in it. So we can be of assistance to you in that. You want to have a separate call to talk about that, we can help you with that.
Elizabeth, I think you're on mute.
Looks like Tam has his hand raised.
Yeah, Tam, if you want to unmute yourself, we can take questions. And anyone else that has a question, either please raise your hand, type it in the chat. Tam, are you unmuted? Yeah, go ahead, Tam. You're unmuted. We should be able to hear you.
Make sure you're not also muted on your phone if that's separate, or your headphones.
Yeah, Tam, just having trouble hearing you. So if you want to type your question in to the chat box. Anyone else with questions or hands up here? Sorry, Tam, just not able to hear you for some reason, but type it into the chat box. And just looking to see if there are other questions. At this time, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. It doesn't mean I won't take a question in just a second. But Don, I'm going to go ahead and shift over. Debbie, I think we're still moving some items, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Ian, I'm going to take that screen share.
Sure.
And let's just see if you all can see my screen here. Okay. Should be able to see my.
I can see it now.
Okay, great. Let me.
I'm not sure I can read it all, but I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Let's take a look now. I'm going to zoom in just a moment, but if you should be able to see the screen, and you see the 5 big moves across the top. So we see complete corridors, transit leap, mobility hubs, and flexible fleets, and of course our next OS. And we see Debbie and Johnny are still kind of moving a few of those items around. But what I'm going to do is focus on, I think, transit leap first. And let me just get this to move down a little bit.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn my camera off so that my computer's a little more responsive. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. Okay, let's take a look at transit leaps. And what I'm gonna do here with transit leap, hopefully you're able to see here is the transit leap. I've zoomed in so that we can see some of the projects here. And so let's just talk about a few of these. MTS has a few here that are underway. Upgrading of the RTMS onboard systems, something underway. Also upgrading the Motorola radio system. MTS, a desired future project here is to add your voice over internet protocols, capabilities for buses. MTS also looking at a future desired project for upgraded scheduling system, including with Zeb. Moving down here through Transit Leap, looks like National City has a desired project for active transit signal priority. MTS, another one here, improved next gen TSP. Sandag, functioning transit signal priority. Chula Vista, rapid TSP. So the teams kind of grouped these all together so we can see, a lot of things happening for TSP. Now, Dawn or Ty, TSP here under Transit Leap, is that the right spot for TSP to be in?
Yes, yeah, I think that one of the reasons we're doing this exercise is that their Next OS is kind of the overarching functionality for the region. But within each of the 5 big moves, there's intrinsic functionality as well. So part of the challenge we're going to have when we develop the architecture and reflect the 5 big moves is kind of the overlap that occurs between those areas. So for example, certain things may occur or may be applicable to multiple areas. For example, it could apply to Transit Leap, but it could also you could provide flexible fleets. Doing signal priority also impacts signals, which is part of your corridor. So these are some of the things we're going to have to sort through how to best reflect them. And we may reflect them with some overlap in the architecture, just so when people delve into it, they can find the components they need, because what we're really doing is setting up typical project frameworks, if you will, that agencies can draw upon by following the path down each of the big moves. So if I had a Transit Leap project, I'd want to be able to go in there and potentially find all the things that would be interrelated to that, as well as understand how it connects to the Next OS or the other moves. So there's a little bit of complexity there that overlaps these, but that's part of why we want to go through this exercise and kind of understand a little better what ideas are coming down the path.
Yeah, Dawn, and Antoinette was just asking a question, relative to that. Antoinette, is that clear things up for you, or you want to add on to that?
No, that captured my concern.
Okay, great. Thanks for chiming in. So as Antoinette has and others are chatting with us, if you don't get an opportunity to open your mic, please go ahead and fill those in. And what I'd like to do is just continue to talk about some of these projects. We started here with Transit Leap, and we have a project where one of the agencies is working with Caltrans to develop the C2C signal system. Moving on here, Chula Vista with DSRC and RSU pilot, that's great. MTS has a fare system replacement project underway. Sandag, passenger counting software, reporting software. I'm gonna have to zoom in on this Chula Vista one. And it's install fiber instead of radio to remote signals. They're adding because fiber is more reliable and has the bandwidth for the closed caption TV cameras. Sandag, also a future project, the wireless dynamic of the in-road charging. MTS, a current and kind of something underway, adding cellular data. NCTD, speed and reliability study. So each of these we've kind of slotted under the Transit Leap. But let's take a look at the mobility hub section. Some of the projects underway, and so here we are with mobility hubs. Looks like National Cities multimodal mobility hub. Chula Vista, excited to see the future idea here. The West Mobility Hub infrastructure. The Port of San Diego, the Port Master Plan update with mobility hubs. Great to see that coming online. Excited to see what the port's doing. ESC, improved outreach to residents about transit centers and utilization.
That's Escondido.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering that. And then here, another Port of San Diego future idea, enhanced transit around the Port Tidelands integrated into the MTS and SANDAG systems. That's a cool one, right? A lot of agencies working together on that.
So, for example, in the mobility hubs, obviously a lot of agencies identified that. I think that's another area where we have substantial overlap, because when you say mobility hubs from an ITS architecture perspective, that actually could have a range of agency as well as privately provided system. If you remember back to the diagram Rita was talking about a little bit ago. So that's another area where we could expect things to be under mobility hubs, or services might relate to flexible fleets. They might also relate to NextOS. So you can start to see there's going to be quite a bit of interconnectivity there.
So Don, one of the things we might want to also remind everyone is that NextOS is a coordinating system. So so if a system is kind of a one-off or a single purpose system, it will probably likely have a component that will be under the coordinating umbrella of NextOS.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think in NextOS, you'll find the higher level things that bring all the other systems and the data together. So hopefully that's where the team puts some of the communications projects. But I think there's also some big data, things that might relate to big data and performance measures. You see some of that as well. So I think we're going to see that get fleshed out more as we start to organize this. And I think the other thing we can do as a team is go back and maybe have to duplicate some of these things or overlap them in a different way that we can then send out to the stakeholders so they can kind of consider how the things might cross these different areas.
Yeah, Don, and I'm just kind of showing the NextOS, and we're chatting about these different projects. Anyone have anything to chime in or to update us on? You know, we're getting close to wrapping up here, and I'm just kind of moving through this so that you can read some of these. We're looking at NextOS and, you know, Port of San Diego.
Yeah, could they provide some clarity on
Harbor
the
Drive.
HD2? Oh, Harbor Drive 2.0, yes.
2.0, yeah. The Chula Vista broadband signal communications upgrade.
See, that's good. Elizabeth knew what that was, because I thought I'm like, HD hard drive. Why?
That's what I think it is. Port of San Diego. Let me know if I mistaken, but that's what they're calling it. Harbor Drive 2.0, I think. Well, you know, some of these other projects here, NCTD, you know, this fully automated system reporting, Poway's fixing communications right now, City of Vista, fiber communications instead of radio to remote signals, again, more fiber. Somebody was talking about this in another one we had under a complete or flexible, a transit leap, excuse me. SANDAG working on ConOps and system requirements for the mobility data clearinghouse. SANDAG future idea, data-driven design for multimodal options for access and equity. Caltrans active transportation data collection, would love to see that. Chula Vista broadband communications, MTS, their OND data, passenger OND data capability. So, you know, each of these ideas, and let me just kind of take the screen back out here, are great to see. And, you know, Alex, the project team was talking a little bit about, you know, getting some feedback from, sorry, I went too small on their team. Getting some feedback from our the agency reps on the call today about, you know, how can SANDAG, its project team here, and the regional architecture, ITS architecture, you know, what kind of guidance are they looking for? And so I think as we're getting about 15 minutes left on our call, Ian, can we go back to the PowerPoint, please? And everyone, we can share the screenshot. We're going to keep working with these projects. We so appreciate you working with the mural and working with us there, but let's switch back.
Yeah, you just need to release your screen, Elizabeth, and then I'll share again.
Okay.
So you guys should see the PowerPoint again.
Yeah, so that's kind of shifting from those projects that we were talking about and the interagency coordination that's needed. Rita's sharing with us what the regional, ITS architecture, how can we work with you? What guidance would be most beneficial to you, from the actual RAD IT and from the project team. And so we're asking you to take note here. And Debbie or Dawn, please remind me who these are going to. And we need to drop that email address into the chat, please. But we're going to ask you to take a look at, yeah, go ahead.
We'll actually send an email out to everybody on the call that was on the stakeholder list and ask for their response back. So they'll be able to just reply. And I think that'll work. And to this point, if you're familiar with the architecture, it kind of exists in four frameworks: the enterprise framework, the functional framework, the communications framework, etc. So, but we didn't want to get into that complexity. So what we wanted to understand from what the architecture can give you information on are these types of things: roles and responsibilities, on what's regional, local, or state, functionalities that should be associated or could be associated with different systems, the data flows to and from those systems and between different agencies, the standards associated with that, as well as the physical components and elements that might be associated with different types of systems. So I think what we're trying to get feedback from the stakeholders on is, where do you feel the biggest challenges are for you that you can draw from the architecture the most? Is it at the higher level? Is it at the more detailed level? And, is it all the above? And I think we're just looking for a little bit of feedback from that perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Don. And just looking at the chat, Antoinette was saying, can we send this out in a survey link? And so it will be via email. So something easy for folks to respond to. Just looking for responses by the end of next week. So the email should come out tomorrow, and looking for responses so that we can, take all these inputs today that we provided in terms of your ongoing or your underway projects and your desired projects, and then take a look at what kind of guidance you're looking for. Dawn or Alex, Roy is asking in the chat about performance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I assume when we're talking about performance, there obviously the systems and what's in the architecture and the elements in the architecture relates to the performance monitoring systems, which can exist at the local level all the way up to rolling into the regional or even beyond that. If it's terms of the actual performance of the functions and the equipment, there are some of that guidance in the functionality and ultimately in the requirements as you start to drill down in your project. So as Rita said, there's tons of pages of information to draw on as you start to drill down. I don't know if that covers Roy's question or if that was what he was trying to ask.
By the way, this is Hamid. Can you hear me now?
Hamid, yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, gee, I've had a problem with this. So did you get Tom's comments? He sent some comment and question. If you want more explanation.
We did.
Yeah, if you want more explanation, I can have him come over and I'll use my phone. Come in, Tom is here.
Sorry, guys. I was trying to get my mic to work. So I guess my question is, with all these widths and so forth, is it a requirement that SANDAG and Caltrans can require us to follow through, or is this more like a guideline when we implement ITS products and infrastructure and so forth?
Maybe Alex, do you want to start that or?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the short answer, if you're using federal funds, it is a requirement. For any systems, any technologies that you want to implement that would use federal funds, it is a requirement that has to line up with the regional ITS architecture.
Okay.
So,
but that doesn't mean that can I just say one thing? It doesn't mean that it has to be identical to it. The architecture may call something differently than what you call it. It also may not define it the way that you define it, and your connections may not be exactly the same. So we can help you with that. If you can't find it or see yourself there, we can help you with that. We can help you figure out where that is, or because it is massive and it's sometimes hard to find things. So we can help you with that.
Okay.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Tam or Hamid, did you have another comment or question?
Did you have something else? No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, guys, thanks so much. Sanjeev did comment. Sanjeev, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and share your comment here.
Sure. I was just saying, you were asking whether, whether the agencies are interested in high level or low level help and so on and so forth, or alignment with these architecture concepts and so on. My thought is that region wide, and that's why the federal requires that we have some region wide common architecture and so on. So it's useful to have that common architecture so it can be helpful in region wide concept. But obviously local agencies are looking for something that facilitates implementation rather than gets, creates more work to kind of translate architectures and so on.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Sanjeev. And for example, what Rhea mentioned, I mean, the idea behind the architecture, it provides some guidance to the local agency. We just need to be talking to the same sort of language from the technology side, right? What in past, what we've done is a local agency goes off and tries to procure, for purpose of sort of just discussion, a new camera to detect vehicles. To the extent possible, the idea there is that at least to prepare ourselves to achieve and get the ability to maybe get federal funding, then the architecture will weave through that discussion. These are the same language that we need to be speaking to. Now, if a local agency wants to pursue their own, new camera with their own funds, the difficulty will be, like you said, there would not be a regional context to that system.
Until they connect to the regional system, and then it becomes an issue where it must connect to the architecture. But I think it's again, we may be making this a little more complicated than necessary. If you were looking at the software, and you actually, I like to enter it from the service packages, because services are something we're all familiar with. So rather than getting into this kind of difficulty, if you just enter into where the service packages are, if you could go back to the slide where we're connecting the service packages. I don't know if we still have that slide, but it has the service packages defined into the 5 different areas. Okay, so here's what you're looking at. And if you were looking at these services, we've used briefs like Transit Leap, PS04 or PM01. If you could pull up the list, do you have the list of the architecture actual service packages? Because guys, if you were looking into the service package, you would go, I mean, we're just listing numbers here, but if you were looking at what they're called, you would go, oh, wow, this is transit, bus rapid transit, or I can't access it right now. But what I'm saying to you is it's much simpler than you think it is. And it's not just for the net. There you go. Thank you. These are your service packages. It's not just for go past commercial, go down where they're going to recognize themselves in maintenance and construction or public safety or public transportation. Go back, traffic management. Okay, here you go. Traffic signal control. You can't really get much simpler than that. If you click on that, if somebody could click on TM03 for me, traffic signal control, there you go, guys. There's everything. This is all of there's your traffic management center, there's your roadway equipment, there's your other roadway equipment. This is what you see every day in your jobs. So now you have a place of reference. And so while we're talking about physical and connections and flows, now we're looking at services. So now I'm hoping you guys can see yourself here. The difference is that it isn't now complicated or just something that's not you, or that you're just doing to get the money. This is actually really helpful for you. Now, if you were in the architecture, you were looking at this, if you clicked on any of these things, it'll automatically give you the answers that you were just looking for on the other chart. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have control over the screen, but if you could example any of that for them, does that help, Hamid, or?
Yeah, I think that was
Yes.
good.
Can you click any further than this?
Yes, you can go and you can click anything you want. Yeah, there's everything you click is going to give you more information. And you can actually, at this level, look at these things included in. So what you're saying is the Traffic Management Center and ITS roadway equipment are included. And if you go included, it's going to give you a list of, if you go click on included, it tells you all the service packages this is included in. Then if you go to communication diagram, it's going to tell you, go down, it'll tell you who talks with who and how they communicate. I know that's getting more into your standards, but go back up again. And if you go to characteristics or security, but it gets everything is connected to everything else, just like in your, but I try to go to the top, please, where it says architecture use. Can you just drop that screen down for them up there? One more up. One more up. Architecture use. There's your planning and project development, but now go over to architecture, the first one. See, you can look here, you can drop that, see the service packages, architecture, service packages. There you go, service packages opens the list we just looked at. All your service packages are there. So it might be easier for you, that's all I'm saying is it might be easier to just go through that list. And we could even provide you with a list of your own service packages and just look at them, because then you'll begin to get familiar with where you are. Is that easier or complicated?
I think the other point, Rita, that we'd made and that I alluded to when I was talking earlier was that we've kind of gone through and done an exercise ourselves, and we'll be continuing to refine that in terms of looking at these service packages, what's relevant within the region that we want to include, and then dispositioning those into the 5 big moves, much like we did from the project level in our exercise into the 5 big moves on the mural. So I think this is good to introduce this concept to those around the table that may not be as familiar with it. But we're also going to be doing work, it's our job to do some work to move it along to a place where ultimately I hope it will be more easily accessible to the stakeholders, and they'll be able to position themselves within not only the architecture, but where that fits within the 5 big moves, because that's, the regional plan.
Right, exactly.
Rita and Ian, thanks so much. I know that when I was getting familiar with this, just signing on or going to the website here and beginning to click around like you're saying, it starts to make more sense. I interjected a bit because we just are ready to wrap up here, and I just want to on behalf of the consultant team, thank everyone for joining. Alex, do you want to chat a little bit about next steps, or Dawn?
Yep. Go ahead, Don.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, Don. Go ahead.
So yeah, just the next steps. I think, as we said, please don't forget the homework exercise. We will be following up with you and asking about that. I think to Antoinette's question, we can send that out in a survey link if that's helpful. The other thing we'll be doing is sending out the resorts, a little bit clearer sorting of the exercise we went through, so you can see the end results of that. And as Ian mentioned, we are going to continue mapping the 5 big moves and kind of working on filling those gaps in the architecture. So that's what we'll be working towards as we move to the next stage of the project. So this is just the start. The other thing I'll say, a lot of it seems complicated. We bounce around through a lot of information. Keep in mind, as we get through our draft and final architecture, we're also going to have some training sessions. So everybody can understand how to access the information and where they live in that, so they can more readily get to what applies to them.
Don, thanks so much. And I just wanted to add, Antoinette, did we get clarity on the federal funding versus and your question around Caltrans and Sandag funds required as well? And that you were kind of asking Alex a little while back. I just wanted to make sure we covered
Yeah,
that
he
for you.
mentioned federal funds, but I was assuming that like state Caltrans and probably the Sandag funding through our grant programs would require consistency with the regional ITS architecture as well.
Yes.
And that's really the tie-in. Everything that we're working through, the idea here is that whatever systems, ITS, whatever data flows, whatever functionalities, because we are approaching this from a comprehensive regional perspective, again, to implement our 5 big moves, a lot of that is tied into federal funds. So to the extent possible, recognizing this is a framework for all of you local agencies that are looking to implement new technologies, the framework will be helpful for that tie-in. But then again, a lot of these framework elements, I guarantee you, those vendors know this architecture. So it's nothing new. It just has to be sort of somewhat processed. It has to make sure that we take your input now, so then we could say, hey, listen, or you could tell those vendors, we do have a architecture in place, and they know what, believe me, they know the service packages, they know the data flows, but that's the consistency that comes in at the regional level, taking a look at the local agencies, but also at Caltrans. And again, the tie-in is that a lot of these projects are federally funded, but that was my comment initially.
Right, thanks for that, Alex. And I think we're all set on this end. Any last comments from you, Alex, or your team?
No, I think at this point, thank you everyone for participating. There's a lot of information that we shared, but again, the idea here is to kind of kickstart the effort again. As Don alluded and the team alluded, there's going to be a follow-up survey, and also reach out. You know, if you have any specific questions on where you're working on right now, we're happy to help at this point, recognizing that the architecture is going to be developed. It's going to be included in the regional plan. So there's a lot of dynamics that we could share right now. So we have all the data flows that the team developed. So if you're interested in that, if you're having a more detailed discussion, please reach out and to the team or myself, and I'll connect you and we'll follow up through you.
Debbie, this is Hamid. Can I have a minute? Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much. We had a little bit of a technical challenge here on our side, and we were successful in getting our projects on the mural, and also took care of the audio glitch. In the future, just as a suggestion, if you want something that may require a little bit more of thinking and research on our part, it might help if you share the questions ahead of time, so we are at least better prepared. The mural exercise was very good, very interesting. I enjoyed it, at least watching it. I wasn't able to participate, and Tam got our projects in there. But if there are things that like we need to think a little bit about and see, that will help the process by giving us opportunity to give you better prepared answers and input.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, Alex, if you're comfortable with that, we'll just again say thanks so much, and we'll watch your email for the follow-up homework.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah.